Welcome to today's episode of Business Exit and Beyond, where we have the pleasure of speaking with Boris Biskupic, a renowned independent property investment strategist from Australia. Boris's inspiring journey from humble beginnings to becoming a leader in the property investment field reflects his dedication and expertise. With over 2 decades of experience, Boris offers a unique and unbiased perspective, helping clients navigate their complex property investment goals by breaking them into achievable steps. Today, we'll dive into his insight on market trends, technological advancements, and the personal resilience that has shaped his successful career. Outside of guiding clients to achieve long-term property growth and savings, Boris finds joy in mountain biking, photography, and hiking. Known for his personalisation approach, he collaborates with a network of trusted professionals to provide a comprehensive portfolio planning. If you're ready to explore the world of property investment, join us as we uncover Boris's invaluable insights and expertise. Welcome, Boris.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we'd love to hear a little bit about that mountain bike and hiking. Tell us a little step of that. That's going back a few years, I'm sure.
Not that far, actually, but mountain biking, I live in Toowoomba, so I do have the range pretty much right behind me, which is the Jubilee Park. And yeah, it's a tough set of trails because I have the World Championships there. One of the tracks is called the Mackenzie Frenzy, and I ain't going on that. I'll be going to fly down there, go airborne. You good trails there, and
Probably need a parachute, right?
well, a bit of that. I use it for personal fitness and just to I just like being in bush and nature. And as for the hiking, I just came back from New Zealand over in October, and actually there's some epic hikes. I did the first 6 hours of the Milford track, which is a list to go back to do the whole lot. Absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic. So the journey started in bikes, and where did you go from there?
Oh, look, it's just, it was more situational. I was going for my walks and, walking along the fire trails and see these mountain bikes whizzing past, and I just went, oh, better get me one of those. And, sometimes things in life, things you don't plan out to do, that's just how they come to pass. So, it just made sense. It was some of the best trails 5 minutes from my doorstep.
Amazing.
That's how that came to pass.
So we know that you're in the property industry. So what actually inspired you to become an independent property investment strategist? And how does that sort of approach provide a unique perspective compared to the traditional advisors within the market?
It's a very long journey, David and Josie. It started really when I started real estate in 1999, and I worked in, not a suburb of the Gold Coast in the rain. And, I remember selling real estate there, and there were some properties that were sold years prior for a lot more than what they should have been sold for. Seeing the emotional hurt in some of these people where, the industry's evolved a lot more than what it is back then. But having to negotiate contracts and people are taking an $80,000 loss, as a young 28-year-old, one or two things, it just really hit home. And I really went on a journey to seek to understand how this happened. And, people were still buying investment properties. So I really wanted to understand everything I could about it. And back then we didn't have data or technology or anything like that. It was a subscription to, Your Investment Property magazine and then the other one. And I would just read them and read them and read them. And slowly, as a real estate agent, I got to understand the fundamentals. And the great thing about being in real estate, you see a great deal and you go, gee, I'm going to buy that. And, I was very fortunate to be in real estate at a time when, it was the first, I guess, boom I experienced, which was, 2001 to 2003. And, you couldn't put a foot wrong. You'd buy something or just go up in value. So that was my leg into the property market. And then it was just working out how to leverage from that. So the first 4 to 5 years really grounded me in the physical property aspect of it. Negotiation became a very strong point because you had to negotiate back in those days. And then the journey switched to finance in 2004. I won't take you to the journey, what led me to become a mortgage broker, but one thing led to another. And I spent 16 years as a mortgage broker. And funnily enough, a lot of my property investment customers that I was selling in the latter years of my real estate ages, they followed me over to finance. I really did have to put the runs on the board and prove my worth first because, you don't trust a mortgage broker wet behind the ears. But they knew my ability to understand property. And then I started developing a lot of tools, loved Excel. So I was using that to do a lot of the number crunching and researching, all the things you need to know about property. And that was really the foundation of it. In that mortgage brokering process, I came across a financial planner and I remember sitting down with him. He goes, "Boris, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want 10 properties." And then he proceeded to tell me all about debt recycling as a strategy to create wealth. And I went, "Well, where do the 10 properties fit in?" And, it just wasn't part of the plan. So I went looking for other financial planners and, financial planners are good. I'm not dissing them or anything like that. They just weren't meeting my needs. So I decided to study financial planning to understand why they don't like property. And, there's no rational reason for that other than, their license to sell equities and securities which come under an AFSL. Of course, property is a unregulated product. So that's why typically financial planners don't recommend you buy investment property in Australia under our current licensing regime. What I did take from that journey was the art of risk profiling. So before you go buy shares, the financial planner takes you through the whole risk profile process. And I noticed there wasn't even a separate risk profile to superannuation and, your own money. Super, boy, I gave me that, put it all on black. My money, look, I want you to look after this and I want to see it grow. So there was definitely difference in attitudes of risk. And I thought, well, what about property? So I created a risk profile for property and I just sort of running it past a few customers and they loved it and they told their friends about it and a few more, even to the point that I went to a couple of AFSLs and they go, "Look, we really love it, but it's just it's not in our space, it's not in our scope and we're not covered under PI to do that." So I'm not saying, look, it's a be all end all. And I noticed, advisors have really stepped up, especially in the property space and asking a lot more questions and goals and fundamentals. It's not just about saying, hey, you got equity, you can produce the property. So my whole driving ethos really started from, I remember that night, with that customer, 2 contracts, rating. I thought I achieved the record of the street. Needless to say, they're losing $80,000. I thought this was a great moment. It was a tough moment for them. They had to start again. So I keep coming back to that. So everything I do is just sort of really focused on that long-term journey. I'm not going to make a claim that I help every investor invest safely. It would be nice to say that. That's what's in my heart. But like all investments, there's risk. And sometimes you don't. I think it's understanding what you're getting into, understanding how different property types work. There's a lot of great companies out there that offer great product and also a great strategy. But the question is that strategy right for your personal circumstances? And do they really unpack that? And are they willing to say, look, our strategy is not right for you, try this? And I've noticed that even from this, frequent roles where I was just really, how many have you sold today? And, it shouldn't be about how many have you sold today. It's how many customers have we helped educate and understand their journey to achieve the things they wanted to achieve. So to wrap it up, I've taken what I did as a mortgage broker for, 16 years. And even though I would actually spend more time talking to customers about property, the byproduct was I got to do the finance. And then what I would do is I refer to someone in the property space. So if they wanted to buy something new off the plan, I knew people who could facilitate that. If they wanted to go out on their own, I would put them in touch with a local agent. And, buyer's agents was sort of coming into play in about 2010, a bit more accepted. So I started having relationships with them and saying, well, here's someone that can help you for a bit more time for. And the independence allows me to be me. It allows me to take the time to have conversations with customers so I can really take the time to get to know them. Some people are they know what they want. They just want the cake. They're not worried about the recipe. They just want results today, and that's fine. I can adapt to that strategy. Other people really want to understand how it works. The recipe. There's a point where I'm not going to go into, if I'm using that analogy, the growing phase of each ingredient. I'm not going that far back. We've got the ingredients, we've got the recipe, here's the result. There's a real danger of trying to overanalyze.
So it's a bit like baking a cake, isn't it then? So if we use the analogy of the cake from starting in the real estate world of selling real estate to then becoming the mortgage broker to supply the funds for the real estate, and then going deeper again into the world of financial planning. That's a big cake to sort of mix, isn't it? To put it together, to get to the stage now to be a property strategist. Tell us some more about that.
It's a bit like a cake shop. I don't know how we come to this analogy, but anyway, this is where we've ended up. I've chosen strategy as my strong point.
Yes.
Because I understand that. As a property strategist, I don't want to do the role of a buyer's agent because one time, I really don't want to go out in inspecting properties. And also, as we're grown as an industry and property's becoming a lot more dataized, and I put that in inverted commas because people are just using data to substantiate a property purchase. Property still has a soul. You still got to have that gut and feel about the property. You've got to understand the fundamentals of that area. You can look at all the data points. That's very important. So the data side, whilst I understand intimately, you've got to be really good at it. So that process, I have people who are really good at that. And I generally use the analogies more from the medical profession, if anything. So when you're sick, you go see a GP and you go, hey, doc, I'm sick. And the doc has a look and he sees, okay, bit of a heart murmur there. I'm going to send you to the cardiologist. And he looks at that part of your health. At the same time, you could be getting a headache. And some people prescribe brain surgery when you only need a Panadol. So it's important to so what I try and do is put the right professional in place so this person can build a team around them based on what their personal journey is. And a lot of people have a very different journey. So that's why I don't have a sort of a one size fits all. It's a bit like business. Every business is kind of unique in a way, even though there's a lot of similarities because you've got people's capability, their goals, their desires, how they're going to start, how they're going to exit, things that you guys would be very familiar with. And, when it comes to property investing, a lot of people aren't thinking the end, at the end of the journey, now what? Are you going to be those little fish in the bag at the end of the first Finding Nemo movie, sitting in the Sydney Harbour going, right, okay, that was a great journey. What do we do now? And the amount of people that you ask, and I encourage anyone to ask this that's got a property investment, just go, hey, just curious. Why? what's your why? Why are you doing this? What is it that you want to achieve? And I would say there would only be a percentage of people that can really articulate what their plan is and what they want to do and what they want to achieve with that. And so a lot of what I do is that sort of mental mindset of, getting them to along that journey. I was mentioning to David offline, the majority of my career is being in the most boring times of property ever. When we take from 2004, rode the GFC, and then from 2010 to 2020, where there was virtually no growth. I think the Brisbane property market only increased $8,000 per annum based on the median price over 10 years. Whereas 2020 to 2024, we've seen an 80,000 increase over the last 4 years each year. So they're two different markets, and I've spent most of my time in the boring stuff. So you need that mental mind space and that resilience to get through that. To then, we know there's always an event that triggers something. And, for a lot of people, they were waiting for 2021 to happen. And it did. And a lot of them had the trigger points in their plan, and they were able to achieve their goals.
So when you just covered a little bit about the GFC there, do you have like a typical case study that you had, and as we were talking before, that was related to, say, even the American market? If you can sort of elaborate a little bit more on that and tell people about the journey, especially that mindset of what they had to go through to get those types of returns, which didn't obviously happen straight away.
Yeah, there's one customer that comes into mind, and in 2001 and 2002, they bought 3 properties off me. I didn't know how he did it because I was a real estate agent and I couldn't buy that many. As soon as I moved into finance, I learned a term called low doc loans. And that's how we bought the properties. And I managed to help him buy a few more. And of course, as we know, during the GFC, lending got turned upside down and low doc loans became out of favour. I had a very good portfolio. At that time, he hadn't really articulated why. He was just buying properties. He just made a start. He was just buying because he could. He was very handy. He could renovate. He had a bit of capability there. The GFC was an interesting time for business and property. This particular customer, I won't mention his name, but for the sake of the name, I'm going to use John. John, I know what your goal is because we've spoken about this a few times. John, you need to do some tax returns now. We need to get high taxable income. And so over a period of a couple of years, he actually worked on his business. And the mindset there was he wanted to buy more property. He wanted to buy his dream residence. We managed to get that. I actually helped them bid at auction, which was awesome. And they bought that property and it was done on a full doc basis, which was even great. And as we were going through the market, we sort of said their goal was to have their main house unencumbered and 3 investment properties unencumbered. That was the goal. That's what they wanted to get to. Because from the period of 2001 to 2008, I've been working on systems and said, hey, I need a plan. Hey, we need to do this. So as I was sort of learning and developing my craft, the customers were coming on that journey with me. So, and everything was organic. And then we had pretty much 2010 to 2020. There were conversations, Boris, this property's killing me. The cash flow, all these sort of things. I said, John, remember why we're doing this. So we would review the finances. We would do the restructure to improve the cash flow, get a lower rate, keep things on interest only, stretch out amortizing. We used every financing trick to improve the cash flow. We also had a very good property manager, and we knew of one instance where the property was going to be the tenant had given exit. I said, okay, so are you willing to go out on the limb here? So in this particular case, we decided to renovate the property in a week, paints, carpets, new appliances, really modernized it, was able to increase the rent, and that improved cash flow. So there was all these little things, and everyone's journey was different. There was part of the strategy, which wasn't planned. He had to sell one property because it had actually grown quite well despite all the others. And it's kind of like a game of chess. Some say never sell, some say always hold. This particular property was able to retire some debt on the main residence and give a little, whilst it was growing, it wasn't performing that well. So it helped their cash flow a little bit so they could hold it for longer. 122, we had this plan of trigger points, and I call a trigger point a bit like a computer program, if, then, but. If the market does this, then we look that, but what's stopping us? We haven't had the growth. So people say, I want to buy certain things in a time frame. I learned very quickly to switch time frame to trigger points. And it was just, it would be like to say, I want to achieve this in 2 years' time. A time-based goal can work if you can control what happens in that time. So in the property market, there are things that we can't control. Growth can go above and beyond. The GFC happened, restriction to lending, all those sort of things. So, and then we had the Royal Commission and all those sort of things. The trigger points eventually, what we initially thought was planned out over maybe 7 years, happened in 2. And that's just the nature of the property market back in 2021 to 23. As a result, property sold, 3 kept, main residence unencumbered. And then I had the privilege and torture of watching his family holiday for 2 months in the USA, taking him to, they did it over the Christmas break. So they took him out of school early and, dropped them back to school just after Australia Day. And they had the most amazing time in America. And when someone says, what are some key achievements? And it's not about what I've done in my business. For me, it was nice sending him a message at, New Year's as he's in New York, over that Christmas period in Times Square. And I said, mate, that's amazing. And he goes, mate, wait until 2 weeks' time. You're going to be really jealous. And, there he is sitting, not courtside, but pretty close at an NBA game. And I'm like, oh, John, mate, picking off my goals. What's going on here? So they're the things that really trigger me. And, that's just one example of a client. And not all my customers become so close friends, but, I'd like to think a lot of them do. And that's the journey of what triggers me.
Yeah, it's great. Changing people's lives and destiny, really, when they never imagined to be there. Hey.
I'd love that to be a byproduct, not a headline.
Yeah.
In this day and age of marketing, it's really hard to cut through that noise. And I guess a lot of people in business have to make that decision. How do they want to position themselves and what is it they want to achieve?
Oh, totally. And just on that, because obviously this is the business exit and beyond. Your journey, like you say, is stepped through a whole lot of different realms, relatively in the same sector, but still a whole lot of different businesses. Even tell us about those sorts of journeys. Obviously, one opens up, one closes, or whatever, partners, or whatever the journey was, without naming names or anything like details. But yeah, our listeners are very much on that journey of thinking or considering closing down, but some of them don't want to close the door and go on to something else. And your journey has been very much like that, hasn't it?
It's been sliding doors and turbulation and you name it. I endearingly say that there's a saying, when a person with money meets a person with experience, the person with the experience gets the money and they swap.
Yes.
And, that was one of my mistakes of buying into a concept.
Yes.
Which just didn't work. And it was, when I started mortgage brokering, I didn't really have the end in mind. I was just there. We had built something. We'd built something great. No real structure. Just, when you're a mortgage broker, and especially back then, we were just write loans, accountant, fix it, write loans, accountant, fix it. So there was really no thought process into anything until, circumstances in my life just brought everything to a halt. And, there was quite a few surprises and heartbreaks and, I wasn't prepared. It didn't work out well in my favor. And, in sport, they say if you fail to plan,
Fail.
you plan to fail. And that was a big part of it. So, there was health issues there, and I took a real reset and, just laid low for 2 or so years, just, working in a PAYG job. And as much as I loved it, just wasn't ticking my boxes, because there's that little fire inside of you that just, if you're meant to be doing something, every day at work, I was just thinking about property investment. And when someone came in for finance, an investor, I'd light up. Even the manager goes, "Boris, why are you here?" And so I thought, well, I'll play it safe, and go work for someone. And again, it just wasn't quite there. So now I'm in the journey of, I've still got that decades of experience behind me. Nothing's changed with me and what I do. However, I'm at a stage now, I have a decade's experience of reflection. And one of the things I want to do is actually leave a legacy this time. So I'm creating a business with the end in mind. And, I went to my financial planner and I said, I've got a 15-year plan and I want to do it in 10. And so we're really structured. And I said, now in 15 years' time, here is what I want to happen. I said, I want my business to be valuable. I want my business to be transferable. And I want my business to be able to be, I guess, keepable, if that's a word. When I say keepable, it is the true sense of the business being an asset that I don't need to work in that can produce me an income. So they're my 3 objectives for in 15 years' time. Can I transfer it to my kids? Can I sell it? Or can I keep it as an asset that can produce an income for me in the future? So I'm navigating those journeys now, and I'm structuring the business. So almost every decision I make, does it meet that checkbox? Is it creating a transferable business? Is it creating a sellable business? And is it creating a business that I can potentially step away from it? The exciting thing about it is I know what the end result looks like. The terrifying side of it is I don't know how I'm going to get there and what I'm going to do. But I do know I need a team of professionals to help me do that. So one of the first things I'm doing is speaking to, obviously, the planner who specializes in family wealth, asset protection, leaving legacy for kids, because that's something that's very important to me. And then also considering my life stage, how do I continue my investment property journey? I won't go into that because I don't want to be providing any sort of indications of advice.
Yes, fair enough too. Yep.
Very generic. I guess if there's a saying, keep the end in mind.
Yep.
That's what's driving me. And even when I was mentoring mortgage brokers, taking them from their journey from, hey, I want to be a mortgage broker. I said, great, why? And what do you want your business to look like? So then I can better mentor them. And, I've had some very successful case studies there where brokers have actually created great businesses and they're now operating on their soul, ticking the boxes and doing what they want to do. The ones that didn't have the end in mind, that didn't have the work ethic, didn't have the drive, weren't prepared to learn, they obviously struggled and they're no longer in the business. So, mortgage brokering is no different to a traditional business. There is a high failure rate. And I believe that failure rate comes from not having the right people around you to lift you up, to guide you, to mentor you, to advise you.
So it's as much about the mental side. So you can have all of the money, the expert advice, but you haven't got that mental capacity. And then the other part that you were saying is obviously a business that's not dependent on you. So obviously there is a lot of businesses that if the business owner, if we gave them a sort of a test and say, come on, let's go to Europe for 6 weeks, most of them don't really survive, do they? So your plan to looking forward is very remarkable, really, compared to a lot of people that come to see us who are looking at exiting their business, and really 80%, or I'd probably be more like 90, but we'll just say conservatively, 80% have no plan at all. So it's actually a privilege and honor to talk to someone that's gone through this journey to probably get there, of course, to actually be planning that, even though you've done the real estate and the the brokerage and the finance, and now you are here as a strategist in the real estate world. Do you find you've learned that along the way, that let's put something in plan in mind from all of the, say, challenges that you had in the past? Would that be a good reflection on that?
I think it's a perfect reflection. And, real estate and finance, and, there'll be potential listeners thinking, oh, yeah, real estate, you've got a rent roll, residual income. And in mortgage brokering business, hey, you got trail, so you got a residual income. I'm going into the mindset that I'm not going to have a rent roll and I'm not going to have a trail book. So I'm thinking, how do I put strategies in place to create a business where I can step away? So it is a bit of an extra challenge, and I'm going to draw on the experience, of being in mortgage brokering and being in real estate to create those, to turn the business into an income stream. And I know for maybe my 15-year plan, the first 10 of it, I might be just working. And it's that exponential curve that I know towards the end, maybe those things can start come to life. I like to think they could come sooner. Again, I know from experience, I'm not going to put a timeline to the trigger points. What I am going to do is I'm going to create trigger points. So when I achieve this milestone, I will know what the next step is because I've pre-planned the next step. Then it just becomes really an assessment of my skill, capability, and performance. Have I met the KPIs to reach that milestone that I set for myself? So, it's becoming the transition from being a technician or whatever it is one does in their business. If we use construction, I'm a plumber, I'm an electrician, I'm all those sort of things. You can scale up by having staff, or, is there another way? And I guess part of our journey in life is to find out, is there another way that I can do to achieve those goals? Or if we look at hamburgers, there's some really good hamburger shops out there that make some beautiful burgers. Take Third Burger in Queenstown. There's actually a better one in a smoko van called the Smoked Pickle. They even make a better burger in New Zealand. It works for them, but they're not as big as McDonald's. And the difference is systems and processes where anyone can come in from owner level to manager level to crew member level and carry on the business of business. And, in my journey on the next 10 years, the intellectual property that's going to reward me is going to be those systems that I put into place, those processes that I document. With technology, the learning curve is just even more so. Are we going to use AI? What are we going to use to make our businesses run? So there's another layer that, consider in this day and age. How do you remain relevant and competitive and all those sort of things? To even just grasp that, you need the mindset. And, I see it no different to property investing. And we've got all the tools, we've got all the properties, we've got all the brokers. Everyone's out there doing their bit. The consumer really needs to have that solid, dead set mindset that they have. I remember going to a PD day in real estate, and Andrew Trim, he was a rower in the Olympics. And he says, you need pinpoint laser focus to achieve your goals. You need to have that focus so narrowed down that you know exactly what you're doing if you want to be at that elite level. And that elite level could be as a solo canoeist or a solo technician, or it could be the leader of $1 billion company. You still need that absolute mindset of pinpoint laser focus to achieve those goals. And of course, coaches and people to guide you along that journey.
Yeah, so a lot of people get to a stage where they are, or just say, exhausted and sort of run out of energy in their business. Did you ever have that type of experience yourself? And you're thinking, oh, look, I'll just sort of close the door or sell up or do whatever along the journey. Did you have any experiences like that, or or did you just decide to just go from one to the next? There must be sort of a trigger point somewhere along the line, was there, or to going from one to the next?
Yeah, from 2005 to 2012, yeah, I was exhausted. It resulted in chronic fatigue and all sorts of things. And, your life can fall apart. And being honest, my life did fall apart. It was just one of those things. I didn't have a big enough why. I didn't have a big enough goal. I wasn't on the same page as my partner. Wasn't on the same page as my business partner. It was just like a mouse on a mouse wheel, just running the motions, paying the bills, making the money. But the part of it that really kept me going was my clients and my customers. And so every time a customer would come in, it was almost like escapism for me to be able to spend time with them, and then you get back to the grind of actually doing the work. You have a great 30, 40-minute conversation. And in finance, that can result in 20 hours work, and then how complex the financials are. And then you're dealing with, all businesses have their own unique challenges, and I'm not going to go into the troughs of mortgage brokering, how much fun we have behind the scenes. Some businesses are very good at masking all that. They go to a broker, they go, yeah, that's fine. And the customer goes, oh, that was great, and it was so easy. Meanwhile, the broker behind the scenes is just going, losing their marbles, having mental breakdowns because they don't want to bring that to the forefront. And they do all this work, and the customer is thinking again, oh, we need to get another loan. Feels pretty easy, but that broker will just go somewhere else. He hasn't demonstrated the value of what they've done. So there is a bit of a science between making the invisible visible. Getting the customers on that journey with you so they understand that the value you're providing, because, there's people that will use one broker and then quite easily go use another. Same with property and real estate agents. They're not demonstrating their value. So it can really wear you out. And at the end of it, you just want to just throw it all up. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I've had enough. I'm getting no support. Who's really going to take the time to care about you? They say, are you okay? People go, are you okay? So you reach out to them and then they run a mile.
Yeah, because they don't really want to know, do they?
No. And even to the fact of seeking professional help to get your mindset right. For me, it was environment. Change of environment, time to reset. Not everyone needs that, but some people maybe do. And, for me to move to Toowoomba was that change of environment. It was change of pace. It was riding my mountain bike on those trails, which gave me that healing, which kept that fire inside of why I love property investing so much.
So the property investing was really that why that just kept you going. So you change the environment, change the people around you to a certain degree, but really the why kept you going, wasn't it?
Well, it's something I know. And, I think you see, do what you love every day.
Yes, we do.
It's just something I'm good at. I enjoy doing it. So, and as I say to my sons when they're going through school and their current jobs, I remember my youngest one, 21, he was an apprentice. He wasn't before 20s, now 23 now. I think he started his apprenticeship 18, 19 or something like that. I said, mate, just be the best apprentice you can be.
Yes.
That's right.
Because you never know what opportunities are down the track. And same with my youngest one, he worked at the casino, and I said, be the best croupier you could possibly be. And he made it to learn everything he could about the games. And he was one of the few employees that got to do multiple games. I said, if there's a lineup of 20 people and they're SAC 18, you want to be in a position where they're going to pick you. At least you've got that choice to whether you want to stay or go, as opposed to saying you're the one that's got to go. So, it all comes back to mindset and to really, that work ethic of, if I'm going to do this, I want to be good at it. And in a way different as well. That's my other one, think outside the box. Or I don't even know what the inside of a box looks like. And I go, yeah, you're probably right. But There's always a way to do something. There's always, when I was mentoring mortgage brokers, I'd say, a loan is just a puzzle waiting to be solved. You just work out how to solve it, and they all can be solved. And sometimes the solution is we can't help you. That's okay.
And that's like life, isn't it? When you talk about the box, the puzzles, the journeys, the roads, that whether you turn left or turn right or go straight ahead, that's all part of the journey of life, isn't it? So, because obviously it is the business exit and beyond, it doesn't mean that, say, for example, a lot of people think they hit 65 and that's the finish of their road. But really, people have got so much knowledge and wisdom within them that really it's a stage of life where it's really just the beginning. Well, it can be the beginning, while some people may be closing the door. But if they can add to what the next generation by sharing their knowledge, still perhaps staying in business or pivoting, it's a bit like what you're talking about your sons and the legacy for them to continue on with your business that you're already planning, that's 15 years out. You would need to be their coach, won't you? And then prepare them in that process from taking all of those years of knowledge as from a real estate agent to a mortgage broker into finance. And here you are taking all of that and bringing it together to share that with a whole lot of other property investors, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's it. But without all of that journey, you wouldn't have that to share, would you?
No, and that's part of my 15-year plan. I'm 54 now. So I've got 1 year of preparation. That makes me 55. And, 55 to 65, I'm mentally prepared to do the hard work, put the work ethic in. And from 65 to 70, I want to have the choice with what I do. And I'll use the mortgage and finance industry again. There's a lot of people in the industry who are looking to exit that, and they've got a lot of knowledge to give. And the saddest thing I see is the young ones who think they can do it better. Sometimes you need that wisdom. And even now, I still look to those senior to me, just tapping into their life experiences. How did you get through this? How did you do this? As well as keeping in touch with the young ones. And, I'm very fortunate. I've got a very strong computer background and I love computers and technology. So, when people are talking AI, machine learning, social media, algorithms, I can get what they're saying. I understand what they need. But when you can overlay that with, the modern stuff, it's really important. So I had a book on my desk. I was just going to show you, but I seem to find it at the moment. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's a 1945 print.
Yep.
Still haven't got the 1939 first print yet, but the oldest one I've got is 1945. And I tell you, if you're in a service business, the fundamentals, especially in part 2, 6 ways to make people like you, nothing's changed in 100 years. On social media, nothing's changed. Use those principles. So there is wealth and wisdom in the older people around. It's just how we apply it to our modern environment.
Wow. So valuable. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Boris. That was like so much insight, wasn't there, David?
Totally. This totally gold. Lots of experience, and you can't beat that experience on that journey that you can share as well. So thank you very much, Boris, for your time.
Oh, look, when you're passionate about something, I was just looking at the time and so sorry. It's just, it's just little bits of me and, some of it resonates with people. But if I was going to leave with something, keep the end in mind, work out how you can exit that business because it can make the difference, really can make a difference. I know it would have made a difference in my life. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to come on was to share that, because I didn't take the steps. I didn't do the actions. I just let it. Massive opportunity lost. I know I'm not going to make that mistake again because I'm going to surround myself with people who can ensure that I don't.
That's fantastic. That's so much wisdom there, right there. If we can we'll keep this recorded. Well, look, thank you for joining us in this episode of Business Exit and Beyond. And as we've explored powerful strategies for building and managing successful property portfolios with Boris Biskupic. We hope that everyone here has found today's discussion informative and full of actionable advice, as we did. If you're interested to take the next step in your property investment journey, remember that Boris is ready to guide you with a personalised, unbiased approach. Is that right? And be sure to connect with him to take advantage of his free consultation offer. And I want to wish you a happy birthday for your birthday that is coming up on the 5th of March. Was that accurate on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, 5th of March, 54.
54, well done.
So that's going to give me one more year of preparation before my 15-year plan.
Yeah.
Focus.
Yeah. So everyone, please make sure you send him a lot of love through social media on that day. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more engaging discussions with industry leaders. Feel free to leave us a review to share your thoughts, and please share this episode with anyone who you think might benefit in today's discussion. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for another episode filled with inspiration and practical insights. Until then, take care and happy investing. And we'll leave Boris's detail below, and you can contact him and ask him questions as well. Yeah. Thank you, Boris.
Thank you, Boris.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.